So I have this blank wall here. I then built this thing. What if I told you something as simple looking as this could solve multiple problems in one? If you've been around here for a while, you know I have an obsession with lights. It could be a wall panel, or you can think of it as a wall lamp. You then have this small shelf for books or decor. And there's another shelf, or is it? It could also act as a desk, or near a bed, a nightstand. This space-saving creation can save you space, not only in the bedroom, but it also could be placed by an entry door, or down in hallway, or in your living room, maybe you're dining. If you have the tools, or a friend that can build something for you, then you're in luck, because I'm gonna show you exactly how it's made. Technically, you only need one sheet of plywood, and one 2x12 by 8-foot southern yellow pine lumber. Luckily, I had some leftover materials from previous projects. I actually didn't go into this project with a plan, I just had a visual. The only plan I had was figure it out as you go. The back panel I end up using was already cut to that size, so I kept it as is. There's a frame on the back panel which I ripped this piece of plywood to get those parts. Now I'll trim these parts to the desired length. I made 2 long strips for the vertical placements and 3 shorter pieces for the horizontal placements. This entire setup will be mounted to the wall using French cleat. So to create those parts, I'm going to set the table saw to 45 degrees. And I'll double check that with a carpenter square. Now I'll rip 4 separate parts with one side having a miter profile on it. Here I'm using a 2" by 8" southern yellow pine. I'm not going to use all of this, so I'm going to trim off the part that I need. So if you were to buy one 2" by 12" piece of lumber, you can just cut this section away from that. I'm extremely thankful for everyone that has subscribed to my channel. Collectively, you guys have made it possible for me to create content and do the things that I love. So I can understand the frustration of waiting on content from me. I too get frustrated because I like to finish projects and often I'm being pulled in many directions. Being a single father with a mountain of responsibilities outside of content creation can be a bit overwhelming. The piece of lumber you see in my hand right now was intended for a different project which I shot back in March of 2022. A lot happened in my life since then. This thing was collecting dust and I just dug it out. Even though this is cheap lumber, the defects in it caught my eye. I saw an opportunity to fill it in with some epoxy. I worked the epoxy down into the crack and hovered around it until I was able to fill it in. 3 years later, I'm removing that tape as I'm about to add this to the current project. Construction lumbers are not always straight, so it's hit and miss trying to run these parts through a table saw to try and create a straight edge. While this may require a bit more time, I'm going to use a hand plane and a level to try and create the straightest edge as possible. The front edge I'm not too concerned about, but the back part, which is going to be up against the plywood panel, I want to make sure it is as straight as possible because the eye may catch any imperfection. The more time you spend into making these things as accurate as possible, the less trouble you're gonna have later. I know it's hard to tell at time because I usually speed up the videos just to keep the pace moving along. When I'm doing physical work, I am locked in, so I pace things. I don't put time on a project, I don't chase speed, I chase results. When you build with rough lumber, expect a lot of sanding. From the beginning of time, I never enjoyed sanding, but it's part of the process, so I power through. As I'm sanding, I'm gonna take a quick detour. Lately, I've been on a mission. I work long hours, and honestly, sleep has not been my top priority. But I know how crucial it is, so I'm making serious changes to fix that. After all, why settle for anything less than the absolute best when it comes to rest? It's summertime, and I'm sure I can handle the heat when I'm working outside. but when I'm in bed, I need to be cool. Otherwise, getting deep and restful sleep is a struggle. You get uncomfortable and restless, and if you ignore it long enough, you start to think that it's just normal. It's not. Here's the thing. Finding the right mattress matters. I kept putting it off until I found Helix Sleep. They have this quick, painless quiz that asks about your sleep preference, body type, and then matches you with the perfect mattress. For me, that was the Helix Sunset Luxe. Yep. Game changer. It's only been a few weeks, but I'm already loving the comfort and the cool temperature compared to my old mattress. My daughter even tried to take ownership because she thinks it's soft, but I had to wrestle it back. Okay, maybe that's just me being competitive. Anyways, once you find your perfect mattress, Helix deliver it right to your door with free shipping in the US. The mattress come roll up in a box, and it's your job to unroll it and let it grow. Here's something that sounds a little off the wall, but it's right there on their website. They offer a 100-night sleep trial so you can really test it out and make sure you love it. If your sleep isn't great or you just need a new mattress, check out helix.com/DIY creators. Or you can click on the link down in the video description. And if you use my link, they will know I sent you and you'll get 27% off site-wide. I'm gonna get back to this project, but sleep well. Everything is cleaned up and ready for the next step. I'll be creating a frame on the back of the plywood. To take advantage of the French cleat system, this needs to happen, whether you're using LEDs or not. I'm placing some reference lines on the parts so I can take the guesswork out of where I need to drill the holes. Since I have more drywall screws than I know what to do with, I'll use some of them to secure the frame to the back of the plywood. Looking at the length of the screws and the thickness of the frames, the screw needs to be long enough to go through the frame and into the plywood. Counterboring the holes will make sure I make up for the length of the screws, but also so the screw head doesn't interfere with the wall. To create a uniform look with the LEDs glowing onto the wall, I want to make sure that the frame is uniform and offset the same distance on both sides. You can glue these parts, but I didn't bother since I'm using so many screws, and the screws was placed approximately 12 inches apart. Now, since I'm drilling into the layered side of the plywood strips, I had to be delicate with how I drove the screws in. On a few occasions, I noticed how easy it was for the plywood to split. The frame setback was approximately 1.5 inches from the edge. I'm attaching the first piece to the French cleat system. I placed it at the top of the frame and secured it with a few screws at the top. I then add one screw on each side to keep it firm. If you've never done the French cleat before, the direction of the miter pieces are important. To give myself some flexibility during the installation, I'm going to trim off a piece of this part. Otherwise, this has to be perfectly aligned onto the wall. I like the idea of shifting it from side to side. This way you can nudge it into the perfect spot. The last thing I want to do is fight with the parts because they're too snugged. To keep things simple, I went for 2 shelves. You can add more if you like. In this case, I'm going to use the bottom shelf as a nightstand/desk. If I'm going to use this as a desk, I want the bottom of the desk to be approximately 28 to 30 inches from the floor. In my case, this panel is not going to go all the way to the floor. So I have to keep that in mind when setting the height of the desk from the bottom of the panel. So to make this happen, I'm going to draw out a reference line going all the way across. Now I'm going to identify where the frame is on the back of the panel. Now that I have all the measurements I need, I'm going to mark the locations for the mounting holes. At this point, I can take the lumber and place it right up against the reference line. Once I have them laid out exactly how I want it, I'm going to clamp them. I find these markers to be very useful. They're perfect for marking holes just like I'm doing here. Everything looks good, so now I'm going to drill the parts. I made this simple little guide to increase my chances of drilling a straight hole. Now that I know exactly where the shelf and the desk location is, I'm gonna put in the second French cleat part. I tried a few different finishing tones and ultimately settled on a dark walnut Danish oil. I went with this color because I already had it on hand and I was only planning on doing one coat. After my quick test, I wasn't in love with it, but I decided to just make a decision and power through. This is where things can get a little personal, trying to figure out which paint to go with. I hit the sides with the brush and the foam roller for the top. After the paint dried, I hit it with a light sand and then applied a second coat of paint. This was a hard decision for me, trying to determine where to put the light switch. I figured I don't really need to see the switch, so maybe I can put it under the desk. Also, I was thinking about laying on the bed and just reaching under the desk, flip a switch, and boom, there's light. There's nothing sexy about the switch, so it doesn't need to be visible. Now I'll just measure and make sure when I drill the hole for the switch, it falls inside the frame and not out. I feel good about this location, so let's drill it. Adding this switch isn't just about lighting up the wall. In my head, consider it a big wall lamp, to give you that subtle dose of light in the room. I will list all the items in the video description needed to make this circuit work. You can pick whatever style switch you find, but I use this round rocker switch, along with a DC power jack. And of course, a 2-wire 12-volt LED strip. I don't want to keep up with a remote or change lights, so a simple switch should suffice for this project. I need to drill a 7/16 hole here for the power jack. Now, I couldn't find the proper bit that was 7/16. In my experience, you should never use a spade bit, especially one like this, on a finished project. These are designed for rough construction, and you can see how nasty the hole can get, but I was willing to take the risk. I'm not driving to a store for one bit. I need to drill one more hole, and this is for the LED strip. I'm also drilling this at an angle so I don't interfere with the screw, but if you also notice, I'm using a spackle knife so I don't damage the paint. Now this is just gonna be a snug fit, so I'm just gonna push this in by force, and that'll be it. Now I'm gonna pass the wire through, peel and stick the LED strip. As I make my way to this side, the LED strip ran short, so I need to extend it. You can cut off the needed amount and extend the strip here. Or you can do what I did here, which is drill a hole and feed both wires through. I'll do a splice on the inside to keep things simple. I crimp the connectors onto the wire, slip those onto the switch, and we're good to go. Now I'm gonna add wires onto the DC power jack. The one I'm linking down below actually come with those wires on it already. I'm holding the wires from the DC power jack. I'm gonna peel the wires and connect the red wire from the DC power jack to the switch in the leg of the switch. Twist those wires together, and then the other leg of the switch, I'm gonna run that to the red wire on the LED. At this point, there should be two conductors left over, the black wire from the power port and the black wire from the LED strip. Take those two and twist them together. In simple terms, the switch is there to just interrupt power. Just make sure nothing is touching. Plug your 12-volt transformer into the port, toggle the switch on and off to make sure it works correctly. Now I'm just going to cover the splice and crimp the connectors. This is the vicinity I want to install this build. The first thing I want to do is use my stud finder and locate the studs in the wall. I was lucky enough to find two studs in the wall. Before you commit to your location, keep in mind that this is the direction of the French cleat on the panel. That means the one being attached to the wall needs to face the opposite direction. With that in mind, let's install. I put a total of 4 screws in the cleat. The 2 bottom one straight in and the 2 top one slightly angled down. After hanging the panel, it was too high for my liking. I dropped it approximately 2 inches, then I added the second French cleat. Safety is very important, so what I want to do is make sure I can properly secure this piece. I have a few pieces of tape on the wall to help me identify exactly where that piece of French cleat is on the wall once the panel is up. I'm using 4-inch lag bolts, which I think should be sufficient enough to support these shelves. I'm trusting everything I've done up to this point that once I screw these on, they should be straight. For the longer one, the shelf, desk, or nightstand, whichever one is more fitting, this one will take 3 lag bolts. I recommend getting at least one bolt really close to being tight, but not all the way. This should give you a little wiggle room to make adjustments if needed. If you look all the way left, you'll see I have a piece of masking tape on the back of the panel. This way I don't scuff the wall up while trying to sit the panel on the cleats. I'm often working alone, so I do trust myself to get this on the wall. If you build one of these, it's not worth the risk. Get some help. It's more awkward than heavy in my opinion. To make sure this is not accidentally lifted off the wall, I'm going to add a safety screw. As I spoke to this before, the masking tape on the wall helps me locate where the French cleat is on the wall. It's never worth chancing it. I think the safety screw is necessary.